When we speak of boundaries, the mind often conjures images of unyielding stone walls, of vast, desolate distances, of the chilling sting of rejection. We picture barriers built to keep others out, to enforce a cold separation. But this is a profound misunderstanding, a shallow interpretation of what true inner boundaries actually represent. Real, resilient inner boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are, in their most elegant function, simply about defining. They clarify precisely where one person ends and another begins. They are the subtle, invisible etchings of self that allow connection without absorption, intimacy without dissolution. And there are individuals who carry this profound clarity with quiet, consistent grace, often without needing to utter a single explanation. They simply are. Consider for a moment the very air we breathe in social spaces. Emotions, like invisible particles, spread. They are incredibly contagious. A colleague's stress over a deadline can ripple through an entire team, tightening shoulders and furrowing brows. A flash of anger from a frustrated driver can transfer, subtly, to the passenger, even if they have no direct stake in the incident. Anxiety, perhaps the most insidious of all, can infect a room, a family gathering, a conversation, leaving everyone feeling a vague unease without quite knowing why. Many of us, almost instinctively, internalize whatever others feel nearby. We are, in essence, open receivers, our emotional antennae perpetually tuned to the frequencies around us. We witness a friend's despair, and before we can consciously process it, a heavy cloak of sadness settles upon our own shoulders. We encounter someone radiating frustration, and a subtle tension begins to coil in our own gut. This isn't just empathy, it's emotional merging, a profound, often unconscious blurring of lines that can leave us depleted, confused, and unable to discern our own authentic emotional landscape from the borrowed one we've adopted. The sheer weight of carrying not just our own burdens, but the echoes of everyone else's can be crushing, a silent, pervasive exhaustion that saps joy and clarity. It feels like an obligation, a necessary part of being a good or caring person, to feel what others feel, to mirror their distress. But what if this isn't the only path? What if there's a different way to be deeply empathetic without being emotionally subsumed? This is where the strength of inner boundaries truly reveals itself. Individuals with these defined edges possess an innate capacity to recognize with crystal clarity you're upset. They can see the distress, acknowledge its validity, feel genuine compassion for the person experiencing it. Yet critically, this observation does not automatically translate into, therefore I must also be upset. There is a pause, an internal filter, a subtle yet profound act of differentiation. They understand that while emotional resonance is natural, absorption is a choice, or rather, the lack of a boundary is what allows absorption to occur unchecked. It's like standing on the bank of a rushing river. They can witness its power, feel the spray, understand its force, without feeling compelled to leap in and be swept away themselves. This isn't coldness, it's a higher form of empathy, one that remains present, active, engaged, but without emotional merging. They can hold space for another's pain without internalizing it as their own, which paradoxically allows them to be more helpful, more present, and more resilient. Think of Sarah, a social worker, often immersed in the turbulent emotional lives of her clients. For years, she would come home utterly drained, the stories of trauma and despair playing on a loop in her mind, the emotional residue clinging to her like a shroud. She felt every tear, every frustrated sigh, every flicker of anger, as if it were her own. Her empathy was boundless, yes, but it was also a gaping wound. She struggled to differentiate her own anxieties from those of her clients, often finding herself on the brink of burnout, questioning her own mental stability. She believed this was the cost of caring, the unavoidable price of deep connection. But something shifted. Through a process of quiet introspection and mindful practice, she began to notice the exact moment the other person's emotion threatened to become her own. It started with a subtle tightening in her chest, a familiar wave of despair, or a surge of anger that felt alien to her usual disposition. Instead of simply letting it wash over her, she learned to pause. She'd internally articulate, "This person is feeling profound grief right now. I recognize that grief." And then, crucially, she would follow with, "This grief is theirs. It is not mine to carry." It wasn't about shutting down her feelings. It was about acknowledging their source and defining their ownership. This practice didn't diminish her empathy, it refined it. She could still offer a comforting hand, a listening ear, and genuine understanding. But she was no longer a sponge, soaking up every drop of emotional turmoil. She became a stable anchor, a clear mirror reflecting back understanding, rather than a distorted echo. She realized that by not absorbing their emotions, she wasn't just protecting herself, she was better serving her clients. Her presence became more grounded, her advice clearer, her capacity for sustained compassion greater. She was no longer battling a constant internal storm, but rather standing firm amidst it, a beacon of calm. This ability to delineate your emotion from my emotion is a superpower. It allows for deep, authentic connection without the corrosive cost of emotional entanglement. It's the silent declaration that while hearts can connect, souls have their own distinct perimeters, and within those perimeters lies the truest form of self-preservation and sustained empathy. It allows for deep, authentic connection without the corrosive cost of emotional entanglement. It's the silent declaration that while hearts can connect, souls have their own distinct perimeters, and within those perimeters lies the truest form of self-preservation and sustained empathy. When we hear the word boundaries, our minds often conjure images of towering walls, creating distance, fostering coldness, or delivering outright rejection. We imagine barriers built to keep people out, an isolation born of fear or inflexibility. But this common misconception couldn't be further from the truth of what truly effective inner boundaries represent. Real, mature internal boundaries don't push people away. They don't sever threads of connection. Instead, they serve a more fundamental purpose. They simply define where one person ends and another begins. They delineate the self not as an island, but as a distinct continent in a vast ocean of humanity, capable of both independent existence and profound connection. Some individuals, whether through innate temperament or years of deliberate practice, carry this profound clarity quietly, consistently, and often without ever needing to offer an explanation. They navigate the intricate dance of human interaction with an almost effortless grace, never becoming a chameleon in social settings, forever altering their hue to match their surroundings. They remain themselves, a steady flame amidst shifting winds. Consider, for instance, their approach to the swirling currents of human emotion. Emotions are inherently social, designed to spread and connect. Stress travels, anger transfers, anxiety can feel almost infectious. Many of us are predisposed to internalize whatever others feel nearby, to absorb their emotional state as if it were our own, mistaking empathy for emotional merging. But those with strong boundaries create a crucial, healthy separation. They possess the capacity to recognize you're upset without instinctively translating it into, therefore, I must also be upset. Empathy remains vividly present, a compassionate witness to another's experience, but without the dangerous blurring of emotional lines. They stand firm as an anchor, allowing others to weather their storms without being swept away by them. This inner clarity also extends to their need for external validation. Weak boundaries often chase validation, engaging in a desperate, endless quest to be understood by everyone. We've all heard, or perhaps even uttered, the plaintive pleas, "If you only knew me better." Let me explain again.
I just want you to see. But strong boundaries cultivate an acceptance of limited understanding.
They understand that not everyone possesses the context, the interest, or even the emotional capacity to fully grasp who they are or why they do what they do. So they cease the exhausting act of over-clarifying their identity. Their self-definition isn't crowdsourced, it's an internal compass, unwavering and true. They understand that to be known by a few, deeply and truly, is infinitely more valuable than to be vaguely understood by many. Furthermore, these individuals approach guilt with a discerning eye. Guilt is a powerful social glue, indispensable for keeping relationships stable, groups cohesive, and expectations intact. It's an evolutionary mechanism. However, guilt isn't always an accurate barometer of wrongdoing. Sometimes it merely reflects conditioning, an inherited sense of obligation, rather than a genuine transgression. People with strong boundaries notice guilt signals, that familiar tightening in the chest, the whisper of should, but they don't obey it automatically. They pause, they evaluate, they ask themselves, is this truly my responsibility, or merely a learned obligation? Emotion informs them, provides data, but it doesn't command their actions unconditionally. They are the captains of their own ship, not merely passengers swayed by every emotional tide. They are also remarkably adept at recognizing subtle attempts at obligation. Not all pressure comes wrapped in a direct demand. Sometimes it sounds softer, almost solicitous. It would mean a lot, or I thought you'd want to, or you're the only one who can. These phrases, seemingly innocuous, subtly imply a duty without ever explicitly stating it. They tap into our desire to be helpful, to be seen as valuable. Strong boundaries detect that subtle shift, that implied burden. They perceive the underlying current of expectation, allowing them to choose freely, not compliantly. Because implied obligation, however gently phrased, still counts as pressure, and true autonomy demands the freedom to decline it. When it comes to declining requests, their approach is equally distinct. After saying no, many people feel compelled to repair their image, to soften the blow with elaborate apologies. I wish I could, I hate saying no, I'm really truly sorry. This is an attempt to manage the other person's potential disappointment, to mitigate any perceived damage to their own likability. But strong boundaries permit refusal to stand alone, unadorned. No, I'm not available, or that doesn't work for me, delivered calmly and clearly. There's no frantic identity repair, no emotional cushioning required, because setting limits, stating what is and isn't possible, doesn't necessitate self-correction or an apology for simply existing as a distinct individual. They also don't overinvest in others' reactions to their choices. Someone might feel disappointed, frustrated, or surprised by their decision. Weak boundaries absorb that reaction as a personal responsibility, leading to immediate attempts to soothe or backtrack. But strong boundaries differentiate, I control my choice, but not your response to it. They allow others the space to process their own emotions independently, without rushing in to fix or soothe what they didn't cause. They understand that people are entitled to their feelings, and their own well-being is not contingent on universally pleasing everyone. In social settings, where groups subtly shape behavior, dictating where to go, what to like, what opinions to agree with, many people adapt their preferences to maintain harmony, to avoid being perceived as difficult or different. They become the chameleon, blending in, often at the cost of their authentic self. But strong boundaries preserve internal signals. They can gently, without confrontation, say, I prefer something else, or I see it differently. This isn't an act of rebellion, but of quiet self-assertion. Because true belonging, the kind that nourishes the soul, never requires self-erasure. It requires the courage to bring your whole, unedited self to the connection. And perhaps the clearest, most behavioral boundary of all is the ability to leave situations that consistently violate them. If environments repeatedly ignore their limits, minimize their needs, or pressure them to abandon their identity, strong boundaries don't endlessly negotiate, plead, or suffer in silence. They decisively reduce exposure, create distance, or simply exit. Not with drama, but with a quiet certainty. This isn't about punishment, it's about protection. Because boundaries, in their deepest essence, exist to protect the continuity of self, to safeguard the core identity that allows us to function, to thrive, and to genuinely connect. So let's cast aside the old metaphors of walls and distance. Strong inner boundaries aren't rigid, they aren't defensive, and they certainly aren't cold. They are clarity itself, clarity about your responsibility, clarity about your identity, and clarity about your choices. When you encounter someone who possesses this profound internal strength, someone who can care deeply without absorbing, decline gracefully without emotional collapse, and steadfastly remain themselves even amidst intense social pressure, you are witnessing a psyche with beautifully defined edges. And those very edges, those distinct perimeters of self, are not what push people away. They are precisely what allow for true, authentic connection without the corrosive, soul-diminishing cost of losing oneself in the process. They are the scaffolding upon which genuine relationships are built, ensuring that when two souls meet, they can intertwine without dissolving into one another, each remaining vibrantly whole. They are the superpower that enables sustained empathy, healthy relationships, and a life lived with unwavering integrity.